Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cities Skylines. As always, my name is Nulo, and I have a nice cup of coffee here to get me going for this episode. So today we are doing some work on kind of one of the major sort of industrial companies in the city, and that is kind of like logging and sort of construction company. So we're going to be working on two things today. The first of which is going to be their sort of main offices, so sort of head office, and then the second is going to be like a small sort of like sawmill kind of logging area as well. So that's kind of the things that we're going to be working on today. So right now we are getting the foundation set up for the office space, which is on this nice kind of like hill that sort of overlooks a bit of the city, and I thought it was a really good spot to stick this office place, but it's also very close to the highway as well. So if they do have some sort of goods and materials like at the office for storage or whatever, they've got sort of the trucks have easy access to the sort of office. They can just come straight off the highway and come into the loading area, which we'll do up later on. So this place will actually end up having its own sort of exit for one side of traffic, and then there is another exit for the other side. It's not directly into the complex, but it does go into the main road that's right next to it as well. Just because of like trying to squeeze it all in is quite hard from sort of like a space perspective as well. But so basically this build is a combination of a couple of buildings, and you can see I'm sort of using these sort of H pattern. I think they're pillars just to sort of connect those buildings a bit better, make it look a bit more like one building rather than sort of three stuck together. I think that's a really big challenge. It's sort of, if you're doing builds where you're sort of merging in multiple buildings together, it's good to try and use different things to try and make it look as natural as possible, and make it look like the buildings that you're putting together are all part of one big complex as well. So we're just getting the basics of the road layout, getting the sort of foundation and footprint of the complex sorted out. This area here we'll come back to. It's going to be like a loading dock. It actually turns out really well, using a whole bunch of different loading dock assets and sort of line markings and things like that as well. So we'll definitely come back to that one. Again, we're using, so basically the company is going to be called Sternberger. I've used it once before, ages ago, in a completely different series, but I kind of like the name. And I thought the sign kind of fitted well with the building, so I decided to sort of go for that, and it's kind of really the only sort of reason. It's kind of a cool kind of name. So this is that off-ramp I was talking about, which basically goes straight off the highway directly into the actual complex, and then sort of straight to the loading zones as well for trucks. So trucks have nice and easy access if they're coming from outside the city or from the actual sawmill or anything like that as well. And then using these nice Japanese they're sea walls or tsunami guard walls, but they actually I find they work quite well. They act like keys, but they don't take up as big of a footprint, so they're a lot less clunkier than the sort of standard vanilla keys, which is really good because it means you sort of got more room to play around. You can sort of fit them in a more tighter area without too much hassle and sort of funny things happening with the terrain. So I really like to sort of use them as well, and I use them quite a lot, and probably will in a lot of different builds because of their sort of versatility. Here we're just getting the main car park set up. I did have like car parks on either side, but it kind of felt like it was being a little too big for the sort of building that we have. I sort of felt like there was just too many car parks. I didn't want to have an unrealistic amount of car parks, so I basically to get rid of one and then sort of push all the car parking to the right hand side, which gave me a bit more room to kind of play around with sort of like outdoor areas. I wanted more of a court area out the back, and a couple like multiple buildings that were separated, so that you can sort of have employees walking to and from different parts, which gives me room to kind of play around with like creating some more sort of pedestrian friendly like places and courtyards and stuff like that. And then I'm sort of raising this terrain up because this is kind of going to be, you'll be able to basically walk along here and look out over the city. And then we'll also put in like a pedestrian footbridge, so that people can sort of walk across to the train station, which is on the sort of left, other side, basically the other side of the highway, just so that there's those kind of public transport options. If people are coming by train, they can just kind of hop over the highway, and just gives them more options rather than sort of only relying on bus or like private transportation as well. Again, just using, I originally had just some standard boards, but I decided to replace them with these because I think they just look really good. And I kind of like the sort of curved spiral design that is coming out of this this off-ramp, where sort of there's layers of different spirals and things like that. And then we're sort of working on the entrance. So it's going to have like a sign at the front with some sort of nice shrubbery and bushes, like a nice little garden to act as the entrance to the facility. You're making use of this the cool networking walls to kind of make this like little nice sort of arty kind of looking sign, with like different slopes and stuff, as opposed to just like having a standard sign there as well. And then we're working on just this entrance area, making it like a nice little walkway area that sort of people can sort of come in as well. I guess it'll also be how like I guess guests or like clients will come in, because we're going to basically have like a separate client parking, and they'll sort of come down and sort of walk through this main area to get inside the building. Again, using this nice little H pillar just to kind of make a more grand entrance, because the entrance didn't really feel like it fit very well for that being such a main entrance. So I thought I'd sort of add a bit more emphasis on it, by adding that sort of H concrete pillar structure as well, which kind of makes it look really nice. And then just adding some details on the top of some little fences if people sort of need to get access to the top of the roof for whatever reason. These network planters are super useful. I love using these. They've been out for a while, but I've been using them for this whole episode. It's really cool to sort of make these nice little planter like rectangle kind of things, and also to make like custom shapes as well. It's really good for that. And then you can just kind of fill in the middle with like the default prop planters, and you'll see me do that a little later on as well. But it basically allows you to get some much nicer, more custom shapes in your builds as well. Now here was kind of cool. I was using these paths to kind of make a more smoother edge, because if you use the layer painter, it's aligned to a set grid, so you can't really have diagonal lines, because it just kind of looks like a staircase effect, like sort of all these different right angles. So what I did is kind of drew in the main area with the painter, and then basically used the paths to kind of make a smoother edge along the border of the gravel, and then the border of the concrete as well. And that works really nicely to make those nicer sharper transitions that you wouldn't normally get from just using like your standard sort of texture painter as well. And then here we're just adding some nice details to the main car parking, putting some like no parking areas that people might be able to walk through, and then a few like sort of disabled parking areas and things like that. Making sure those disabled areas are close to an entrance. There's actually an entrance very close to where I put them in a sec, so it basically allows people to get in there easily without having to walk too far as well. It's kind of hard to see the entrance. I do come back later and put like a more prominent door, because it's like just a glass sliding door, so it's a little bit hard to see it. But they're basically very close to where these disabled parking icons are as well. And then here, just trying to basically make this area look less sort of concrete, like sort of adding some nice trees. So it's just not like a plain concrete area. Here we're sort of, it's kind of like like a staff area, like maybe where you might have a break, or like maybe people might come here to smoke, because it's kind of off to the side and kind of out of the way, and there's sort of like a wall that kind of separates it from the road. So you might come here for some fresh air or something like that, and we'll basically add some nice little seating areas and sort of trees for shade and things like that as well. Again, using more of those networking walls, and trying to add like a cool design to it, so you can sort of, when you raise and lower these walls, it's not like a straight edge slope. It actually has a nice curve to it, which looks really good for sort of making more interesting like walls. So I figured this is a fairly modern looking sort of facility, so I figured it'd be nice to sort of kind of add to that by having this more arty looking sort of wall, and then having some nice hedges, because we've got the planters there. The hedges look kind of lower, so I kind of like that because it makes it look more like they're sort of more ground plants, that's been raised up in a planter, as opposed to sort of just straight hedges coming right up from the ground. And then putting these dirt mulches just so we can put some nice trees there, so that all the employees have plenty of shade when we put down the benches, and they can sort of sit there without worrying about the sun and things like that. And then we just put in like a nice little arty sort of monument kind of thing. I ended up putting a light on there towards the end of the episode, and it kind of looks cool. You sort of had this lit up sort of art monument. Now here we're getting into the sort of like customer sort of client parking. So basically, like, it's a raised area that comes off the main road there, and then next to it's like a little sort of garbage collection. But this is where the clients will be sitting, and I basically use like a straight drop and used the terrain decals to kind of make it look like the terrain keeps going to that wall, and not have to rely on the slopes that are naturally created when you sort of use the terrain tool, because you can't have a straight drop. So I use those decals to sort of make it look like there's a straight drop, and you've got like a retaining wall that's kind of holding up. And I've used it before in other episodes, and I think the one that you probably noticed it the most was from the like the botanical gardens, or the main gardens, where I basically use these purple asphalts, and set them up at the right height. Used a bit of procedural objects mod to kind of resize them, and then basically I'll come back and sort of put in a whole bunch of terrain decals that match the grass, put them on there, and it'll make it look like the terrain goes all the way to the wall, and then just has a straight drop down, which you should see me placing down in just a second. And then next to that's going to be our client parking with a nice little walk down to the main entrance, with some nice lighting and things like that for that part as well. So you can see here I'm just placing those decals down, and now they're all placed in, and from afar you can't really tell that they're not part of the terrain, which is really cool. I think it just allows us to create so many more interesting builds with this ability to sort of fake how the terrain works, especially if you're working on like elevated builds. Like before it was quite difficult. Now you've got these really cool techniques that you can use to make some really cool builds that might be on like the side of a hill or a mountain, or just generally playing around with different elevations. You've got so many ways to do it, which is really cool. So this is kind of like the main entrance walkway for the clients. Putting some nice shrubbery in there with some dirt, and just to sort of make it look nice and pretty. So when they walk through, they've got a nice first impression when they first come into the building. And we'll add some nice trees and shade for the parking area, so that your car doesn't get too hot or anything like that. The other thing we do is also add, after this, we add some more walls on the other side, just to kind of separate off a little bit from the main road, because I didn't want to put like a fence around the whole area, but I kind of wanted to use like lowered and raised terrain to kind of make like a sort of barrier that separates it a little bit from the main road, but without having to go as far as to put like actual walls and fences to cut it off, because I think like it'd look a little too industrial if I did that. Like I want it still to be quite, have a nice style to it, and not just be like a typical industrial kind of office area that's kind of boring and bland. Because this company's going to have, like, because it's the main construction company, it's obviously going to have quite a bit of money. So they're obviously going to want to make their areas look quite nice. And then putting some more decals there, and you can see because the decals work on like a certain like plane height, you can actually put them on really thin elevated areas without it sort of spilling over the side. So if you just keep going to the right height, it disappears from the ground below, but only appears on the ground above it, as you would have seen on that sort of really pointy area. So that's kind of cool to discover that. You can do some really cool things with decals, having it so not having to worry about fitting it exactly into like a square. You can sort of use it on more, if it's elevated, use it on more sharper angle sort of areas like triangles, and not have it spill over, which is kind of cool. So I'm definitely going to sort of, I think in later builds, definitely play around with that idea, because I think there's a lot of potential in that one here. This part is going to be kind of like the trash management for this area. So obviously it's a big area. You're going to have a lot of trash coming in and out. I do a little bit of work on this, but I kind of skipped a lot of it because I was playing around with the sort of the texture I was going to have, and I originally tried using like a sort of yellowy concrete texture, but then trying to get the right opacity, because there's different there's like elevations and ramps. It kind of messes around with the decals, so I kind of had all these different transparency levels with the same decal, which kind of made it look really patchy and not very nice. So I just ended up scrapping it and just keeping it as with the plottable asphalt. You'll see glimpses of that before I got rid of it, but towards the end I just completely got rid of it, deleted, and just used the asphalt because it didn't look as nice. I wasn't originally going to do that, but because I thought there was too much asphalt in that area, but you know, it ended up looking okay, so I kind of stuck with it. And it just looked a lot better than what it was before as well, because I was trying to put like tire marks in there, and all of the decals were just kind of like fighting each other to stay on top, and so it just looked really kind of like the game was glitching out. So yeah, got rid of that, used the asphalt, and it looked a lot better as well. So here we're doing up like a nice little grassy area, and then to the right of that it's going to be next to this building like another sort of break area where like employees can come and sort of have a bit of lunch. So I'll sort of set up some nice tilings and benches, and just sort of separate off a little bit from the rest of the complex, so you sort of have lunch and not be sort of interrupted by anything or stuff like that. And I noticed there, like the network walls will sometimes snap to the planter networks, which is really weird. So I had to sort of fight that a little bit to make it work, but that's a really weird thing. I didn't know. I even had snapping turned off, but I really couldn't get too close. So I had to build it a little bit further away, and then kind of move it back into place as well. I really like these mulch planters, because trying to create like a planter bed that wasn't grass was really tricky. You couldn't really do it. You could use like some network curbs and the texture painters for dirt, but you'd sort of have to be very limited to that tile that those textures sit on. So these new dirt planters are really cool, and what's going to be really cool is if we ever get like a network version of that, where as we do with the common grass one, because I think you'd really have a lot of fun with like different and cool sort of mulch planter designs as well. And here I'm just adding some sort of prop doors, because the ones on the current building you can't really see. Like a lot of these buildings I use, they're mainly like all of the side is just window, like really sort of, and everything looks like it, like the doors look like windows and stuff like that. So it was kind of hard to see a specific entrance. So I basically just used Nasa done that ages ago, which is just like an automatic door entrance, just so that it makes it look more like there's an actual entrance there, not just sort of random windows. Otherwise, it just looks like there's no proper entrance as well. which I didn't really want to have. And then here, once we do this, this is kind of cool. So I basically made like a suspension pedestrian bridge, and what I did is I have a suspension prop, but it's only for like car bridges and vehicles, so it's too big just to use as for a pedestrian thing. So what I did is took that, turned it into a procedural objects mod, and then scaled it down so that it was the same width as the path, and it worked out really well. I think, funny enough, out of this particular area, that actual pedestrian bridge is probably one of my favorite areas of all, even though it's not really even attached to the actual office building, but it does work out really nicely. And we will come back to it in a minute. You'll be able to see that in action as well, but it just was really cool, and I like to sort of use that again somewhere else, because it's just, yeah, it's really awesome. Here we're sort of getting the beginnings of Little Lookout sorted out using the network garden beds, and I kind of tried to fill that middle space with a I wasn't sure how to do it, but I sort of put a network in the middle, and I kind of made these little like sort of ticks, concrete ticks, which I thought was kind of cool, just to sort of add a bit of design rather than just sort of being like a plain just solid grass area. So you can see it just there, and I thought it was kind of nice because we've got a lot of designed up areas and sort of modern features. I figured that suited perfectly. So it's kind of like a happy accident. It wasn't intentional, but it ended up working out quite well. And like the networks were just far enough apart that there wasn't any other gaps as well. So that was really cool to be able to do that. Here I'm just adding some walls and then lowering down to like a curb level, just to kind of make that transition from the concrete to the just a little bit more sharper as well. It just kind of neatens up that whole area as well. Even though the paths did a pretty good job, you still get a little bit of like an uneven edge from time to time, just because of the way the paths work and like interacting with the other paths and like the painted areas as well. So that kind of just sort of neatened it off a little bit. And then here we're making this really nice little lookout area, which I thought was really good, using some paths and an elevated like pergola. It's a nice area for employees just to come and sort of relax and have a quick look out over the city as well. And you get a pretty decent view of it, which is really nice considering it's not super high up, but high enough just so you can get a good view of the city, which is really cool. So it's kind of cool to add that in. I wasn't originally going to do it, but then I think I went down to first person mode just to quickly have a look around and kind of looked here and thought, you know what, it'd be really cool to have a nice sort of lookout area. And then we had some nice bollard lights, which look really cool at night time as well. So you'll be able to see all that in the cinematics when we get to that. But we still got half an episode to go, and we still got another build to go, so look forward to that afterwards. Here we're just kind of touching up these last little areas and for the sort of surrounding trees and stuff. And then here we're coming to the suspension bridge I was telling you about. So you can see here I just scaled it down and then sort of matched it up with the raised pedestrian path, and then just tried to kind of squeeze in these like suspension pillars. Funny enough, it worked out really well. They were just the right distance away, everything was in the right spot, so there wasn't too much fiddling around, which is really good. Just trying to line up those cables with the railings, but yeah, it looks really cool, which I quite like as well, because we don't really have a network version of pedestrian bridges with those kind of suspension things. We maybe in the future we might, because I know Bisquigglehausen was doing kind of something like that for roads, so maybe he might do one for pedestrian paths, but in the meantime that's a good subsidise, and it looks really cool as well. So I'm really happy that turned out the way it did. Here we're just kind of separating the car park a little bit from the rest of the sort of small road that goes around the whole area, and then just sort of finishing off more of these curb areas so that we can just neaten it up a little bit as well, and adding some finer tree details, and then we'll get to work on the loading dock. But first we're going to put in some lights, because important thing to have, especially this area. I kind of wanted to play around with lighting a lot more. It looks really cool with all the lights as well, going around the path and around the roads and all that sort of thing as well. So it's kind of cool to do that, and just sort of adding some lighting in the pedestrian areas as well. Adding some cool lighting for the sign, I thought it was really nice, just to kind of illuminate that sign quite nicely as well, which is really cool. And then adding in these lights just where the entrance to like the client car park is, so you can sort of see where they're going, and it's well illuminated. Now here's another really cool part, was doing this loading zone. I had some previous loading assets I used to have them and then I deleted them and then I re-downloaded them because I thought I had them, went to use them and they weren't there. So I must have probably done like an asset call and then was like, oh, you know what, I probably don't need these, and I got rid of them. But then coming to this build, I was like, oh, you know what, I really wish I had those assets again. So I tried to look for them, was able to find them pretty quickly, and then use them for this loading zone. I'm using a whole bunch of different props to sort of customize this area pretty well, and it turned out really nicely as well. So I was really happy with that. And then with the line marking nodes, line marking network, it's so quick to sort of really just do up all these line markings. You don't have to worry about prop limit. You can sort of slap them down, and it's really easy to use. So it makes the whole process a lot quicker, which is really awesome. So I'm adding in these different areas. I put in like little like stop decals, so the trucks kind of know where to sit their trailers and how far they need to go before they hit the edge of the loading dock area. And then you have like people that in like forklifts who will come in and bring the stuff inside. Here I had to play around with these a little bit because I noticed that when you're doing corners, when they're connected, when these networks are still connected, they have a bit of an overlap, which is really weird. I'm not sure why that happens, but hopefully I should comment on the workshop so that the author realizes, because like, it'd be really cool to be able to sort of connect them up without having to make them separate as well. Just to sort of make it a lot smoother. I don't know how that works if you try and put a curve in, whether you get the same effect, because I haven't had to use it yet, but I'd imagine it would do something of a similar effect as well. But then it's kind of adding in a sort of no parking area where you might have your forklifts running in between if they're sort of offloading from a different truck, if there's no room in the loading bays, and just where people can sort of walk around and not have to worry about traffic. I had a look on Google Maps and Google Images to sort of see what these kind of loading areas were like, and I did find that they do have these areas that people can sort of walk freely to like the other side where the trash is and not have to worry about getting in the way of trucks as well, which is a good idea because I imagine in a busy sort of loading or logistics area, you sort of, the last thing you want to have to do is worry about where everyone else is. So if you sort of know where you're meant to be, and because of line markings, and you're all sorted, and you don't have to sort of, it's not going to be an issue of accidentally running into someone as well, which is really cool. So the last part of this build is just putting in these little details for the loading area, putting in like a little like office thing, some extra props like this sort of rooftop sort of awning, I suppose, just to kind of, because you've got this sort of sheen glass, I wanted to sort of give a more distinct separation between that and the loading zone, so it wouldn't just suddenly cut off. But then adding in like your sort of trash management, trailers, vehicles, boxes, crates, and things like that, just to kind of finish this area off. I actually put in like a little drainage decal, which I thought was really cool. They put in later on so that you've sort of got areas for the water to drain if it rains. So that will sort of be on the entrance to the loading area. You'll see that in a sec. My thoughts are sort of all out of order as to what's actually happening in the time lapse. I'm thinking of everything before it happens, but that will come up as well. I think I'm doing it, not quite here, putting in some of the decals just to add a bit more texture to the loading area and some time markers. But in a sec, I should come and put in those. They're actually like rubble strips, but they kind of also look like little drains. So I sort of, because they've got like these sort of graded with edges on one side, which kind of looks like it could be passed off as a drain. It's actually the part that vibrates when you get too close to the side of the road, but from a distance it kind of looks like slots in the drain, so I thought I'd use that as kind of like a multi-purpose kind of thing. And then here, just adding in all those last little details before we move on to the sawmill, which is actually another... I feel like that area kind of turned out better than this area. I think mainly because there's in these areas there's no real sort of roads or tracks. Like there kind of is a track, but it's not as clean as the default one. So I use a lot of different track decals with like mud and puddles and stuff like that, as you can see me doing here. And I do that all throughout the whole area, and it actually looked really good because the texture looked more varied than just having your standard road or dirt road texture as well. So that was really cool. It's funny because this part of the build was more of an afterthought, but ended up looking better than the main build, which is kind of interesting. But again, it's all like the sort of happy accidents and sort of unexpected things working out, which is really cool. So I think what also helped is this one because I never made kind of like a sawmill sort of rural industrial area, so I used a lot of help from Google Maps to figure out what everything would look like and how it would be sort of composed in this area. So one thing I noticed is that the buildings aren't just like square buildings. They look like a whole bunch of like squares and rectangles kind of like all merged together. Probably because you've got different areas of the facility all sort of coming off each other. So basically I use a whole bunch of different buildings and basically sort of merge them all together. And then I use I can't remember what the mod's called, but it's basically a mod that allows you to change the main color of all the buildings or growers, which in most cases is generally just the roof color. It's like the primary color, but basically I use that to change all the roof colors to the same color as each other, so that way it makes it look more like this this building is all one sort of building, which I mentioned is quite important before with the other builders. That it's good to try and make, if you're using multiple buildings, try and make it look as all like they're part of the one building, unless like a whole bunch of assets sort of smashed together. So basically I'll come in and like change the whites and greys a bit more so that they're all similar color as well, just to make them all fit together. Here we're starting to use a lot of decals to sort of basically completely recover the standard dirt path texture, just so it doesn't look so plain and repetitive. And the end result looks really good, like almost like it looks quite realistic because there's so many variations in the mud. I know, and you could almost maybe do like a shot of real life and put this next to it, and it might be hard to tell. The other cool thing was I've got these river decals, which you saw me place like very quickly. It's like a riverbed decal. I think it's like meant to be like a dried up riverbed. You've got like the sort of the trails left behind from the water, but on here it kind of looks like trails left behind by like trucks and cars kind of driving over the soil. So I use that a lot because it's a big decal, so it adds a lot of detail to this area without having to place down so many details, which is just really good to be able to save space, save a bit of time. And it also has these like nice little tracks which I sort of use to sort of figure out where like certain other decals can go to make it look like more like there's a truck has driven past quite regularly as well. So that was really cool to have that. Putting in a little shelter here using the procedural objects mod to just scale it down a little bit so that it fits quite well. It's not too big because that's quite a big asset. It's a good asset, but it's very big, so it's kind of hard to sort of slot it in an area that makes sense. Now here is really cool. I had a whole bunch of log assets I downloaded from my other series, but because this is a sawmill, I noticed on Google Maps there are just piles and piles of cut logs waiting to be processed. So I basically get make like a pile of logs, and then just you move it to basically copy a whole bunch of different logs. Saves a lot of time and just adds adds a lot more realism to this whole build. Like, it makes it look like there's a lot of supply here, as opposed to just maybe putting down like one or two. As you can see me doing here, I'm putting down like the rows of logs that they would store from being cut down, while they're sort of waiting to be cut up and stored off. And you can see I sort of fill out the whole area as well. And then basically use a whole bunch of decals to sort of make it look like there's like been trucks driven through here to pick up the logs. You'll see sort of areas where I'll put logs, and I'll kind of leave an area like not covered with logs, so that it looks like the trucks have come in and kind of picked up the logs, taken away, and I'll put like some water there, like the rain's got into it, because there's nothing sort of covering it as well. And then here I'm sort of doing, I guess kind of like a servicing for the trucks. Maybe I'm not sure, like I saw it on Google Maps. I wasn't really sure what it was, but in the maps it was like a little like turnaround area, but it was like focused around a building. So I'm not sure if it's like somewhere the trucks just used just to turn around, just happened to be next to a building. But I thought, maybe this could be an area where they might do some quick, maintenance to the trucks or something, or if someone was taking a break perhaps, and then putting a sort of cover area where these trucks would sort of park and just sort of keep them out of the rain and out of the weather, and not have to worry about that. Again, using procedural objects mod to get the scaling right, because I think that's just meant to be like a pergola for like people to stand under, so obviously it's not going to be big enough for big semi-trailers to sort of sit underneath. So I just sort of came across and rescaled that. And then use these parking assets, and then kind of tried to push them into this rain, because I was kind of basically the idea was to make like a car park, but like it was just like a dirt car park, but I still wanted cars to be able to use it. So I sort of got these parking assets from the actual like parking network mod, and then just kind of pushed them underneath the terrain and sort of put on a whole bunch of dirt assets to kind of cover it up and make it look like a makeshift dirt car park that doesn't actually have any proper markings or anything like that. And then just filling out some of these areas with some sort of like logs that like put off to the side. They've kind of run out of room to sort of store them, so I sort of have to put them wherever they can. I've noticed that a lot, is that the main area might get filled up, and then they'll just kind of have to start putting logs wherever they can, like even in between like roads and stuff like that, because they're just sort of running out of space, I guess. Which is not too bad, I suppose. I mean, in these kind of areas, it's probably like the design of the whole area is probably very free, so they probably can just kind of stick things wherever. They're not really going to be too fussed with where it is or how it looks. And then this is kind of the area where they've had storage of logs and wood, but trucks have come and taken them away. So sort of areas where they haven't really replenished their stock, and they're kind of just getting the scraps and bits and pieces, just getting those last little scraps as they sort of refine them or ship them off to other areas and sell them off as like import and exports, because this city is very much, it's like the forestry industry for this city is the main source of the city's income. So they're going to have, obviously they're going to be keeping resources for themselves for building supplies, but they're also going to be exporting a lot of this to different cities, like for trade and stuff like that. So and in the logistics sort of freight area, it was very heavily focused on exporting wood resources and stuff like that. So I had a lot of trains plopped down with like wood on them as cargo, ready to sort of ship out to different cities, and they'll obviously have trucks doing a similar thing as well. So here we're sort of doing some more natural work. So the biggest thing that sells this area, and again this is coming off Google Maps, is like because they're not super well maintained areas, that they're going to have a lot of natural like bushes and shrubbery kind of growing in between sort of areas that aren't like traversed as much with like trucks and cars, and I made sure to pay close attention to where I was putting some of these bushes. And so basically you can notice there's some mud decals with like water puddles next to them. So I made sure that any large sort of groups of bushes were kind of near these decals and near these puddles of water, because it makes sense that these bushes are going to grow better where there's going to be like catchments of water from like divots in the trucks and stuff like that. There's going to be more water, so they're going to grow a lot better than places in the road or in the dirt paths that don't actually keep water as well. So I basically try and put them as realistically as possible based on where these decals with water are as well. And I think that kind of really sold this place, is that final touch of putting all the trees down along the fence line and along the tracks that have puddles and stuff like that. And you see I put a big puddle there, so there's obviously like a lot of bushes there and bigger bushes as well. And then just kind of putting in these are pretty much the final touches, just putting some trucks in, some some rubbish, some storage things, flatbeds, all that sort of stuff as well. And then kind of putting in trees along the fence line. I notice that happens a lot. They'll have trees running along the fence line. I don't know why. They must just, because they look deliberately planted. So I'm not sure if that's like security reasons or whatnot. Could be to keep the noise in. I'm really not sure, but I know it's there, so I put that in. Look kind of cool. It seems like also these properties, the owners usually, it seems like they live very close. Like I often notice that there's a house, like one or two houses, like really close. So they've obviously owned a large plot of land and this is their business. But anyway, out of time, so that is it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya.